Welcome to CBR. Superman is DC's most iconic superhero, but the icon has been represented in dozens of different ways throughout the years. Today, let's do a deep dive into Superman's history, in both comics and adaptations. With almost 100 years of history behind him, Superman remains one of the most important fictional characters of all time, as he's about to get a new solo movie in 2025. Born Kal-El on the planet Krypton, Superman was created by writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joe Shuster. He first appeared in the comic book Action Comics #1, published in April 1938. The character soon became the protagonist of a successful newspaper comic strip in 1939, but the real-world origin of Superman dates back to the early 1930s, when Siegel and Shuster were friends in high school with no connections in the publishing industry. They had spent many years trying to get funding and publishing for their work, with little success. The duo even split at one point, driven apart by the difficulties of this industry, but they soon became creative partners again, and finally found work creating comics in 1935. Unfortunately, they didn't feel like they could trust their boss, National Allied Publications owner Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson. Siegel and Shuster received a proposal from him to publish Superman in one of his magazines in October 1935. But since Wheeler Nicholson was slow to respond to letters and hadn't even paid the duo for other work they had recently done, they refused the offer and marketed Superman to newspaper syndicates themselves. With the publication of the first issue of Action Comics, which was very successful due to Superman's feature in it, the character became one of the main fixtures in the comics magazine and grew in popularity. This phenomenon eventually turned Action Comics, originally intended to be an anthology, into a series essentially about Superman. In January 1939, Superman became the star of a daily comic strip. In June 1939, he finally got his very own comic book, titled Superman. It worked as a continuation to Superman's story that started in Action Comics and was being expanded on the daily strips. Since then, his origin story has been told in many different ways in DC Comics throughout the decades, but certain elements remain consistent in most versions. Let's start there. The origin of Kal-El's superpowers and his new identity on Earth have always been a central point in his story. His parents are Jor-El and Lara, a scientist and an astronaut from Krypton who realized their planet would soon be destroyed. They built a spaceship for their son to flee to Earth while still only a boy. The explosion that destroyed Krypton not only killed everyone, including Jor-El and Lara, but also transformed the remaining debris from the explosion into kryptonite. Kryptonians who live under a yellow sun become superpowered, but kryptonite is a radioactive material that can be lethal to them anywhere. After that, Jonathan and Martha Kent found Kal-El on a road in a rural area of the United States and named him Clark Kent. Kal-El grew up on Earth with his adoptive parents, living a normal life until his superpowers started to develop. Jonathan and Martha made sure little Clark would become an adult who uses these superpowers responsibly, teaching him to have an unwavering morality. To protect his family, Clark realized he should keep his superpowers a secret. To help humanity without fear of retaliation from his enemies, he invented the Superman alter ego. As an adult, he moved to Metropolis, where he started working as a journalist for the Daily Planet. Superman was often the subject of pieces written by one of Clark's co-workers, Lois Lane. Clark had a crush on Lois, but she developed romantic feelings for his alter ego. While every fictional element of Superman's origins discussed so far in this video is considered fixed lore, there's also a few retroactive continuities that could be considered fixed lore depending on the perspective. During the Golden Age and the Silver Age of comics books, a period that encompasses everything released from 1938 to roughly 1970, comic book writers and readers didn't care as much about shared universes and continuity, even though these concepts were already around. This led to many contradictions within the lore. Retconning contradictions is tricky, especially in the case of a character like Superman, who has been featured in literally millions of comic books and strips throughout the decades. But DC did it right for the most part, and some of the most interesting and well-received retcons they ever made to Superman have been directly linked to his origins. In the 1930s, Clark Kent was an adult when he decided to adopt the Superman persona. However, in 1944's More Fun Comics #101, it was revealed that he had in fact become a superhero back when he was a teenager. His first alter ego was Superboy, long before he turned into Superman. The childhood hometown of Superman, Smallville, was first named in May 1949 in Superboy #2. While only a small detail then, the word became symbolic with the TV series Smallville. In 1986, legendary writer-artist John Byrne created the series The Man of Steel, which reorganized and expanded on the confusing previous retcons. It finally established one simple origin story for Superman for the first time, and it included most elements we've covered so far in the video. Between 2003 and 2004, DC Comics released a 12-issue series titled Superman Birthright. It reimagined the Man of Steel, changing a few details within the plot. One of the most interesting retcons of this era revolves around the crest of House of El. The House of El originally took as its emblem the Kryptonian symbol for the word hope. It's an infinity symbol rotated 90 degrees, resembling a figure 8 inside a Kryptonian pentagon. Although it also represents the letter S in the Latin alphabet for humans, the 2004 Superman Birthright comics series established it had no relation to human culture. However, after the Infinite Crisis event between 2005 and 2006, more alterations were needed in Superman's origin. At the time, both the Man of Steel and Birthright were considered official, but neither made sense in the DC Universe's chronology anymore. To resolve this, DC tasked writer Jeff Johns and artist Gary Frank with creating the modern version to Superman's origin. Right now, the official origin story of the hero is the one told in their 2009 miniseries titled Superman: Secret Origin. It maintains the key fixed lore points we've discussed, but also includes several retcons and adapts it all to fit into the DC Comics continuity based on the Infinite Crisis event. In it, Clark comes to Earth in the same way. He becomes Superboy and meets Lex Luthor while still in his rural hometown. Then, he moves to Metropolis and becomes Superman. According to this latest version, Clark first discovered he had powers while playing football. He accidentally broke another player's arm, which forced his adoptive parents to finally reveal to him that he is an alien. They showed him the spaceship in which they found him as a baby. Clark finds a hologram message in the ship left by his biological parents. The message contains all the information they had time to pass on about Krypton and Clark's true identity. A young Lex Luthor, who would later become a feared criminal, was the first person on Earth to discover kryptonite, though he initially didn't know what it was. Meanwhile, Clark slowly discovers each of his superpowers according to his needs. When Lana Lang, his first love interest, gets caught in a tornado, for example, he learns he can fly. In parallel, Superman's origin story has been depicted in many TV shows and movies over the decades, often with variations. Let's talk about TV adaptations first. Many live-action television series, like The Adventures of Superman and Lois and Clark. The New Adventures of Superman begin with Clark Kent living in Metropolis when he is already an adult. Superman's origins were first the main focus in live-action television in Superboy, which aired from 1988 to 1992, starring both John Hames Newton and later Jared Christopher as a younger version of Superman. The series shows that the interest in Superman's younger years was already there. Thus, Superboy paved the way for Smallville to rule the airwaves in a new millennium. Smallville was a hit show for many reasons, one of which being that it explores Clark Kent's life before he moved to Metropolis, something most other movie and television adaptations don't show much or at all. Running for 10 seasons from 2001 to 2011, Smallville shows Clark Kent's life as a high schooler in his Kansas hometown for the first 4 seasons. These early adventures focus on his discovery of his powers and his romantic subplot with Lana Lang. It also explains how Clark and Lex were friends before they became enemies. Up to that point, it's pretty accurate to DC Comics' Superman lore. However, there are some elements unique to the show. Jor-El communicates with Clark through an AI system in the Fortress of Solitude, for example. This adaptation makes Clark's discovery of his origins more gradual and dramatic, developing a major subplot about Kryptonian heritage and destiny. Smallville Season 1 focuses on Clark coming to terms with his origins and true nature. At the same time, the show introduced a major plot point involving Lana. In Season 1, Clark finds out that his arrival on Earth is connected to tragedy in Lana's family. The meteor shower that brought Clark to Earth also caused widespread destruction in Smallville, resulting in the deaths of Lana's parents. In the comics, Lana's parents are unimportant and generally alive in most versions of Superman's origin. The idea of a meteor shower bringing Superman to Earth was seen before, such as in Superman Birthright, but it was Smallville that introduced the idea of the meteors causing direct consequences to people in Clark's life. Smallville Season 5 reimagines the origins of the Fortress of Solitude. In the comics, it was originally depicted as a frozen ecosystem where Superman could be alone, but it was later reimagined as many different kinds of headquarters, including an underground complex beneath a mountain range. It is the place where Superman first learned about his true identity in many comic book storylines, which inspired its importance in Smallville. Smallville's Fortress of Solitude is pretty accurate to its first comic book depictions visually, but the origins of the place differ. Through the ship's AI, Jor-El instructed Clark to search for 3 Kryptonian stones, which contain the knowledge of the universe, and with them, the fortress was created by Clark's actions in the middle of the Arctic. The Fortress of Solitude turns Jor-El into a source of conflict for Clark. Jor-El has a much darker aura in Smallville than other iterations, especially for being an AI recreation of the Kryptonian scientist. His first message that the Kents discover in the ship tells Kal-El how to rule over humans. But Jor-El was still created in order to guide Kal-El down the right path of becoming a hero. It just often caused conflicts with his human alter ego, Clark Kent. From season 5 to 10, the show moves on to depict Clark's life in Metropolis. He meets Lois at the Daily Planet and other superheroes, like Oliver Queen, also known as the Green Arrow. In terms of adapting Superman's origins, Smallville is definitely the most complete version of the hero's story outside of comic books. The more recent show, Superman and Lois, which ran from 2021 to 2024, is about how Clark balances being Superman and a family man. Some flashbacks take viewers back to Clark's childhood in Smallville, further developing his motives within the plot, but Superman and Lois mostly leaves the hero's origins out of the story. While other TV adaptations have their merit, Smallville remains the fans' favorite. So much so that, after the series finale in 2011, the story resumed in the form of comic books. Smallville Season 11 is a 22-issue series published from April 2012 to November 2013. No movie adaptation has ever gone as deep into the origins of Superman as Smallville. However, it's important to highlight how Smallville not only used comic books as source material, but was also heavily influenced by the Christopher Reeve era in the movies. Christopher Reeve was not the first live-action Superman. For example, Kirk Alyn played Superman in the 1948 Superman series, which was the character's first live-action appearance. However, the 1978 movie Superman is, even to this day, the most iconic adaptation featuring the superhero. It was the first of 4 installments in the Superman film series starring Christopher Reeve, and it significantly rewrites Superman's origins in Krypton. The fixed lore is almost intact in the 1978 Superman, but certain details are exaggerated or included. His father, Jor-El, is not only a brilliant scientist of Kryptonian society, but also an important political advisor, for example. Like in the comics, Jor-El warned others of Krypton's impending doom as its solar system's red sun was about to explode. Jor-El and Lara send their baby son to Earth, who is found by the Kents, but differently from the comics, the 1978 movie version made Kal-El grow up a few years inside the spaceship, arriving on Earth as a young boy instead of a baby. There is no meteor shower in the movie, just one object falling from space. Kal-El crash lands near a road in rural Kansas and is found by the Kents, a couple driving by. They get out of their truck and go check out the meteor, only to find a boy who appears to be 4 years old smiling at them without a scratch. The Kents always wanted to have a child of their own, but couldn't. This scene is followed by another iconic one in the movie, in which Jonathan Kent changes a tire and young Clark lifts up the truck by himself. Jonathan is reluctant to adopt the young boy at first, while Martha begs him to let him stay. They finally agree on the adoption and name him Clark Kent. Following Jonathan Kent's tragic death from a heart attack, Clark is suddenly drawn to a glowing green crystal hidden within his spaceship in the barn. Compelled by its call, he embarks on a journey to the Arctic, where the crystal triggers the formation of the Fortress of Solitude. It's a structure reminiscent of Krypton's crystalline architecture in the movie. Inside the Fortress of Solitude, Clark encounters a holographic projection of his biological father, Jor-El, who unveils the truth about his Kryptonian heritage. Over the next 12 years, Jor-El educates Clark on his origins, his abilities, and his true purpose on Earth. When Clark finally emerges from the fortress, he is fully transformed, wearing the iconic blue and red suit with the symbol of the House of El. The suit is an extension of Clark's alien origins, instead of created by Martha with fabric from the ship like in early comics. Before sending him off to fulfill his destiny, Jor-El warns him of one crucial rule: he must never interfere with human history. This is a major point of contradiction in Superman's origin in the most famous adaptations. In this movie series, his destiny is to protect humans. It depicts Kal-El as a Jesus-like figure, the only son of a cosmic leader with vast knowledge, who sends him to be a guiding force on Earth. In others, like Smallville, his destiny is not so related to human salvation. Zor-El in Smallville never sent his son to Earth selflessly. On the contrary, Earth was supposed to be his son's training grounds so he could fulfill his Kryptonian destiny. Clark ultimately chooses his life on Earth over his responsibilities as the son of Zor-El. It's really impressive how deep the lore of Superman's origins go. It's also mind-blowing to think about how much it can still be modified or completely retconned in the future. A new film starring the character, titled simply Superman, is scheduled for July 2025. It's going to represent a hard reboot to the Superman film series, and it will be the first film of the DC universe. The plot is expected to be set in both Smallville and Metropolis. Not much has been officially confirmed so far, but we already know it will explore Superman's journey to reconcile his alien heritage with his adoptive human family. We can't wait to see how exactly the origins of Superman are told in this new film. Are you also excited about this year's upcoming release? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, thanks for watching CBR.